Good morning, everybody. We're doing a slightly different one today. We're doing it during the day, so it's at 10 o'clock this morning, and we've got Shane Ourea. So thank you so much, Shane, for giving some of your time up to us today. We just wanted to just get to know you a little bit better. I think there's lots of runners who take part in your events and know you from organising the different events at the Dragon's Back and the Cape Wrath and the Skyline and 3-day Lakeland event, lots of events, but maybe don't know you as much as in your own running. So I thought it'd be fun to sort of find out about that as well. And if people are watching, if you've got any questions for Shane, just put them on the comments and I'll bring those on and I'll ask. And just a little quiz question. Behind me, there's a picture. If anyone can tell me where it is, then you'll get a little bonus point. I haven't got any prizes, but you can have a little kudos for guessing where it is. But just as people join us, Shane, maybe you could just tell us, before I introduce you properly, just how you're coping with this strange time at the moment of being having to work from home.
There's kind of two elements to it. There's the kind of business side, which is kind of profound and basically serious. But then there's the personal side, if I separate the two. And actually, I've been really enjoying the slowdown in life. And, you know, life has become more simple. You can't do this and you can't do that. So you stay at home, you do your one bit of exercise a day. And it feels like a real genuine moment of pause and reflection, actually. And I hope that if there's anything good that comes out of COVID, is that maybe people will take a bit more time, myself included in that, to just slow down, reflect a little bit and kind of enjoy the simple things in life.
Yeah. We got a question straight away from Joe Faulkner, who's looking forward to listening. He said, has Shane got any hair clippers in that big shed of his?
I'm certainly in need of a haircut. It hasn't been this long for years.
And so we got quite a few people already watching Shane, so that's good. So I just thought I'd introduce you properly. So Shane, you're the Managing Director of Ourea Limited and acts as one of the race directors in each of the Ourea events. Shane has a background working as a freelance event planner, race director and/or race director at some of the largest adventure sports events. As the race director of Ourea events, Shane is responsible for courses and concepts and also takes charge of the health and safety of the participants, event team and members of the public. He is an elite mountain runner and orienteer who won the coveted OMM Elite in 2011, 2016 and 2017. So looking forward to finding out a bit more about all that, because there's bits I know, but lots I don't know. So maybe you could just tell us just a little bit about your background, and then I'll ask you some maybe more questions about your climbing and running.
Well, I didn't start out life as a runner. I was a climber and very, very focused on climbing from my teenage years and into my 20s, early 20s. And I would still describe climbing as my kind of first sport. If I was really, really pushed to choose whether I was a climber or a runner, I'd probably just about fall on the climbing, although I do running these days. And then kind of as time went on, for various reasons, I did less and less climbing, more and more running. And maybe by about 2006, 2007, I was doing significantly more running than climbing, and that's really been kind of continued through to today, really.
Yeah, well, I've got one picture of your climb which I'll put on now, and this is taken in 1996, and it's in Cornwall, and one of your regular buddies, how you got into climbing, and this is a picture of at Cribbs Cove. So maybe you could tell us just a little bit about this one, please.
So the route is called 14 Lives, 13 Souls. It's just a stunning kind of very pure slab of granite rock at Cribbs Cove, which is where the Penley lifeboat was sunk, and also the Union Star, the cargo boat that the lifeboat was trying to rescue. It's quite a dramatic kind of granite cove on the south coast of Cornwall, and as I progressed as a climber, I kind of went through a natural cycle of climbing harder and harder routes, and then you look at the gaps and you start to think, what could I do here? Could I climb my own routes? There's just this perfect little slab of granite rock, and I love slabs. Looked like a perfect route, and I was there climbing with the Land's End Climbing Club at the time. On the day, they had a club meet there, and I abseiled down the route, had a look at it, checked out some of the gear, and then led the route in the same day. So it's quite hard. I think I gave it a grade of E7 at the time. I'm not sure if that will stand the test of time. It's very, very hard when you work in isolation to get your grades accurate. But needless to say, it's a hard and dangerous kind of slab rock climb.
Yeah. And is it true to say that you've got quite a number of pioneer routes, as it were, the first person to do some of these climbs?
Yeah, I spent many years climbing new routes in the southwest particularly. And although there's a few other routes I've done all over the country actually, but mostly in the southwest. And it's really exciting, abseiling into a kind of undiscovered zone that nobody's climbed in before, and particularly climbing on site when you just go to the bottom and you climb to the top when there's no preparation, there's no inspection, you just climbing on site, working out as you go. You're never quite sure how hard it's going to be. It's a very satisfying, thrilling way to climb. So yeah, I've done a lot of climbing like that.
Yeah. Okay. We've got some comments coming in, people saying hello. Stuart Smith wants to know, or ask, he said, ask Shane to do his SAS training voice.
So yeah, that's many years ago I worked as a stunt double in one of the BBC SAS dramas. So I'd like to say for the record, I have absolutely no military training or background. It has been mistaken. It's quite funny. A competitor once thought that I actually was like ex-military. But no, I'm definitely not. But I got through kind of circumstance and luck, really ended up doing some stunt double work on one of these BBC dramas.
Excellent. Okay, the next thing I'd like to talk a little bit about, Shane, is the KIMM, the Brecon Beacons. And I've got a picture of you here. This is from 2004 with you, with Rich Parry, your partner. So I think this was one of the first ones that you did. Is that right?
It was one of the early mountain marathons I did. And the Kim obviously became the OM over time. So Rich and I, we got to know each other through climbing, and we did quite a lot of climbing together. We both had an interest in running, and Rich was always fitter and stronger than I was for many, many years. The funny thing is about these early mountain marathons, I didn't do any other running. I just did 2 or 3 mountain marathons a year and no training in between.
Wow.
And I would go to a mountain marathon and I would absolutely kill myself trying to keep up with Rich. And then often it would take me 2 or 3 weeks to recover from one of these events. I'd be so broken at the end. But we had a lot of fun, and we were really, really naive and novice and inexperienced. And our navigation errors were not measured in minutes, but they were measured in hours. And we would make mistakes like going over the wrong mountain and into the wrong valley. I mean, they were hilarious actually when you look back on it. But we were kind of young and naturally fit, and we did reasonably well. We always finished in the top 10. And for a number of years, we kind of did some novice class. We did a year of like novice D classes, then some C classes and some B classes, and we just moved up every year until we got to the point of wanting to do our first elite mountain marathons. And then we really learned how inexperienced we were.
So at what point in that process did you start training properly for these events?
So I think it would have been about 2005, 2006. I actually can't remember the date now. Basically, I had a climbing accident, which was long overdue. I'd spent a lot of time soloing as a rock climber, so no ropes, so free climbing. And it's an absolutely brilliant way to climb. It's completely pure, but it's if you make a mistake, it's normally only one mistake that you make. And I'd had a few very near misses over the years, but kind of had this, I think, as a lot of climbers who do solo free climbing, that you have to have a sense of invincibility about you. You have to believe in your ability, or you just wouldn't even be there in the first place. But eventually, a bit of overconfidence and a bit of bad luck caught up with me, and I fell off a route and hurt myself fairly badly. And as I recovered from that injury or injuries, I started to reflect on, the thing that I was missing most wasn't the climbing, it was the running that I now wasn't doing. And I made a conscious decision at that point that I was going to do more running, less climbing. And partly, maybe it was the psychological element of that spell being broken about this invincibility of you have as a rock climber. And then at a similar time, I was running a business called Planet Fear, and I employed a really awesome person called Jenny Johnson, who was a Great Britain orienteer at the time. And she introduced me to orienteering and to a whole circle of friends or people that have become good friends in Sheffield, where I was living at the time, who were running for Great Britain as mountain runners or orienteers. And just overnight, my sense of what was achievable in running changed, and I suddenly was mixing with all of these people who were top class international athletes, and I'm like, well, yeah, this is pretty good. I like to do a bit of this.
I've just put a picture up of you in 2010 doing an orienteering event at the JK. People can see that. Yeah.
So the JK is a fantastic, really brilliant event. It's probably one of the biggest kind of club running orientated events in the UK. They have thousands of people there over a 4-day weekend at Easter. Orienteering is a really fantastic sport, and I really do love it. It's something, it's very inclusive. It's just that brilliant combination of that physical challenge and the mental challenge. It's really unfortunate that it's a sport that is kind of struggling to see a long-term future. It doesn't have that growth in participation that other running events have had, and I think there's lots of reasons for that, but I think the biggest reason is that orienteering is like learning to play an instrument. To be good at it, you can't just do it. You have to invest a lot of time to learn the skills and become experienced, and most people don't have the staying power to become competent. And the sense of being competent as an orienteer, when you're running and navigating and you're visualizing what's going to happen and you're running through that terrain and there's no surprises, you look at the map and the terrain just reveals itself as you've kind of imagined it from the map. It's really, really satisfying process.
Hey, we've got some questions coming in, Shane, which I'll come on to in a moment. Marcus Scotney says, "Morning, Shane." So he's watching.
Marcus.
Yeah, and I've just got a picture here of the Lamb in 2007 with you and Karen Davison. And in your description about this one, you say that this one was just a real time where you sort of moved up a level, as it were. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about this race and how significant it was for you.
Well, I'll just take a little step back. So in 2006, I tried some of my first elite mountain marathons. I didn't finish anything. I ran with my buddy Rich, who we originally started running with. And it's kind of like a combination of we needed everything to go right in terms of navigation for us to finish the length of an elite course, but we're still making navigational errors, and then we were getting timed out, or we'd pick up an injury or something like that would happen. We kind of felt like we were physically fit enough to do it, but everything else was conspiring against us, which is why learning to orienteer made such a difference, because the navigation began to improve. But I also thought, actually what I need is some solid experience here. And rather than racing with somebody who was physically as strong and as fast as me, what I needed to do was race with somebody who was really competent, but maybe just a little bit slower. And I thought, you know what, I've got some really good female friends who are brilliant mountain people, loads of experience, highly competent, but they're just a little bit slower. And if I teamed up with them, perhaps that would be a key to just banking some experience, finishing some races. And so 2007, I made it my plan to race with some various female friends just to finish. The goal was just to finish. It wasn't about results. It was about finishing elite mountain marathons. And I had a brilliant year, actually, a really brilliant year. And that picture with Karen was one of my kind of Sheffield Peak District friends, and we had a really good weekend at the Lamb, and we finished our first mountain marathon, elite mountain marathon.
Yeah, and then the next photo I've got is at the finish of the OMM. When you ran with Duncan Archer, and there's a little series of photos of you coming to the finish line. So again, this was the first time you won the elite category, was it, in that event? And it was just by 13 seconds, which seems incredible. That's over 2 days, isn't it?
Well, there's a real story to that. So, and first of all, there's kind of, since 2007, there'd been this gradual progression of doing more mountain marathons. And in 2010, I did my first mountain marathon. Duncan, who was one of my orienteering friends, and I'd never raced with Duncan. We did the Dartmoor Om together. Excuse me. We did the Dartmoor Om together. We came fifth or sixth maybe. I can't remember. But we had a really good race together, and we thought, we can do more better here. And actually, 2011, I did a lot of training throughout that year, and that's kind of linked back to launching the Dragon's Back race the following year. I had a lot of free time in 2011, so I did lots of training, got a lot fitter. And we came to the Om in 2011, and I think actually the hallmark of Duncan and I's success, we are very aware that we are not the fastest runners. We're probably not the best navigators, although we're good, but we are tenacious, and we make normally very, very few mistakes. So maybe over an entire mountain marathon weekend, we might measure our mistakes in 2 minutes. And for us, a mistake is we have stopped running to look at the map. That counts as a hesitation error. So we're always moving, and we're always making good decisions. So the other runners, however much faster than us they are, if they're making mistakes, it kind of penalises them much more than, well, it doesn't penalise us. And 2011 on was really a case of all of the other good runners, for one reason or another, seem to be making these mistakes and picking up time penalties, kind of retiring through hypothermia, and the list just went on. And Duncan and I just had a really solid race. And on day 2, I think we started in 3rd place, and we disappeared off into the mist. We were running our own race, and a few checkpoints before the end, we came to this checkpoint, and there's a film crew there, and they were filming, and there was a guy doing the commentary, and he said, "And here's Duncan Archer and Shane Ohly," slightly surprised voice. They're just like 2 minutes behind the 2nd place team, and we had no idea. We'd just been going along in the mist, doing our own thing.
Yeah.
And this one of the things I always say to my volunteers at events now is, please don't tell the runners where they are relative to other people. For the elite runners, it makes a big difference. And this was a brilliant example, because it gave us such a boost, and we suddenly had kind of this kind of bit between our teeth, and we went really hard then, and we caught the 2 leading teams who were running together. It was Steve Birkinshaw, Jethro Lennox, Tim Higginbottom and Chris Neer, and they were running as a 4, and we caught them at the next checkpoint. And then there's 3 teams, 6 of us running together, and we're maybe 6 or 7 kilometres from the finish. We can all sense that it's anybody can win or lose this now.
And it's first to the line wins, is it?
Yeah, first to the line wins.
Yeah, so you're all at the same time.
Yeah, they stagger the start on the 2nd day. So if you're leading at the end of day 1, you start first. If you're 10 minutes slow, you start 10 minutes later. So the first across the line wins.
Wow.
So we'd already caught up the time difference to the leading team. And so we were now running as a pack of 6. And we ran for about 10 minutes, and Duncan and I looking at each other and like, we can go a bit quicker than this. And we just upped the pace, and we just slowly started pulling away, and we got maybe 50 meters in front of them. And Duncan and I, again, the strength of the relationship, the running partnership with me and Duncan is that we both navigate. And it's rare that we both make a mistake at the same time. And I was looking at the map and I looked down, I thought we were about to overshoot the next checkpoint. And I shouted out a kind of a warning to Duncan, like, I think we're in the wrong place or something like that. And Duncan, who's basically the better navigator, glanced at the map. And this was such a big decision because it basically won us the race. And he just went, no, keep going, like an instant split second choice. But the other two teams saw our conversation and heard it, and they both stopped.
Right.
And they looked at their map, and there was a bit of a conversation, only like, seconds, but it meant we made a clean break, and all of a sudden, rather than 50 meters, we were 150 meters in front.
Yeah.
Duncan was dead right. This checkpoint was like over the next knoll. We punched that checkpoint, absolutely lit the afterburners, pulled away, and we ran into the finish. But then
did you have far to go from that last checkpoint?
That was like 2 or 3k to go at this point.
Okay, wow.
And we were absolutely hammering it into the finish, and about a kilometre from the finish, Duncan just all of a sudden says, I'm done. I can't run anymore. I'm going to bonk. And I'm looking over my shoulder thinking, well, there doesn't seem to be anyone there. So we start walking, and we were laughing so much because we're like, I think we're about to win the Elite, and we're walking to the finish.
Wow.
We did walk for most of that kilometre, and then about 200 metres before the finish, we look over our shoulder, and there's Chris Neer and Tim Higginbottom chasing us down, and I'm like, Duncan, run! So we had to start running again, and hence the very, very small margin of victory.
Okay.
So anyway, a long story.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
13-second win.
Yeah, so that 13 seconds should have been longer, really, if you hadn't have struggled over the last kilometre.
Well, it is what it is.
Yeah,
and mountain marathon isn't over till you cross the finish line. And actually, if you look back historically, many of them have been won and lost by just seconds. They're very competitive at the top end.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I say we've got some more questions. I've just got one more picture I'd like you to talk about, and that is your the OMM Elite win in 2017. So just 3 years ago, and this is you and Duncan again. And there's a nice picture of you running downhill, I think. So just tell us about that third victory in the OMM.
So the 2007 was the first day was really, really tough. It was very wet and very cold. Duncan and I made quite a bad navigation mistake on about checkpoint 3 or 4. We lost 10, 15 minutes. We were kind of, our motivation was down. Duncan had a real bad bonk that seemed to go on for hour after hour during day one. And we did fight really, really hard through some bad weather just to keep going. And we actually, when we went through Wasdale, we talked about abandoning our race and going to the pub, and none of us had any money because that would weigh too much. Wouldn't take any money. So we're like, we'll just have to carry on. But, our spirits were pretty low at that point. But we were amazed to find when we finished day one that we were leading. And again, I think it's a case of some of the stronger teams, they'd made mistakes or they had given up for various reasons. The weather was very poor, so it got cold and wet. And we just kept going. So, we were in the lead. Day two, we've always had a very good day two, second day. And I think that's, maybe I won't give away all my secrets, but we've always had a good day two. And we felt pretty confident going out with maybe it was a 10 or 15 minute lead that we wouldn't be caught unless we made a mistake. So we just focused on a good, hard, second day, and we won again. So that was our third on win, and many other kind of top fives over the kind of past 10 years. And it felt like a relief, actually. I think that would be the best way of describing it. It was a surprise as well. It was a really tough race. It was very satisfying. I think it was the most satisfying of the wins that we've had.
Yeah. Well, that leads us on to a good question, actually, from Joe Faulkner. He's saying, what is your biggest achievement, would you say?
I think the kind of collection of wins has to be right up there. But I would also one of my climbing achievements, which I'm really proud of, is climbing 500 routes in a day.
Wow.
So
I must admit, I read that and I thought, is that how is that possible?
So, well, I'll briefly, well, won't be brief. The story, I was living in a house with John Aaron when I was in Sheffield, and John Aaron is a absolutely formidable climber. He's really strong, very experienced, and also loves soloing. And it was kind of like this pretty crazy mix of the two of us in a house together, both keen to go soloing. And for many years, we would go out kind of after a day of work on the gritstone and the limestone and just go soloing. And we would climb together, often just a few meters apart on the same route, taking in turns to lead. And we'd climb up one route, down another, and we'd just chat, you know, easy for us climbing. So the typical grades probably HVS to E4 type grades. And we knew that we could climb on a nice long summer's evening, 100 routes, no problem. And then we saw this thread on UK Climbing, which was talking about whether it was possible to climb 100 routes in a day. And we were like, well, we do this regularly already. You know, people have got absolutely no idea of, you know, what capacity some of the better climbers have, I guess. And so we started talking about it. And we were like, well, let's set ourselves a challenge. And we had already got into this routine of going out and doing midsummer challenges. So in June each year, coming up with a climbing challenge. We're like, okay, how many routes can we climb? We're like, well, we can definitely do 100, 200, no problem. 300, probably could do that. But, you know, what if we started at dawn and climbed till we were exhausted in the dark? Let's go for 500. Let's set that as a goal. Let's put it out there.
Yeah.
So the first year that we tried, we failed, and we got to about 300 plus each, but our planning wasn't great and the logistics weren't quite right. And over the next pretty much year, we quite literally learnt this sequence of routes. So you would start at a crag and you might climb up one route, you might go along two, down another route, back on yourself, go back up a route. And we learned the optimum sequence to climb, like every route at a crag, or every route bar the very hardest ones. And often it was easier to maybe down climb an E1, relatively hard, but climb up a HVS, depending whether it was a crack or it was a slab. So it wasn't necessarily the grade that determines whether you climb up or down. And anyhow, that following year, we went out early. We started at dawn.
And is this all without ropes?
Yeah, it's all without, all soloing.
All solo. Wow.
So we started early, and I think we averaged, including travel time between all the crags, one route every 90 seconds for about 18 hours. Wow. So we're climbing really quickly.
Yeah.
John did about 530 and I did 502, and I did the extra 2 just to make sure I got 500 in case I'd miscounted. It was absolutely exhausting, not without its risks, and amazingly good fun as well.
Yeah, excellent. Oh, we got a comment from Jen Scotney. She says, what are your mountain marathon secrets, Shane? So she's obviously listened to that a bit and wants to get more information there, but you can keep those to yourself.
To be honest, it's about refueling properly at the overnight camp.
Right.
So that is the most important thing of like good quality food and lots of calories. And also it's the realization that you don't actually need to like be comfortable and sleep at the overnight camp. That is a luxury, and the lightweight bag is really important. So as long as you're warm enough to snooze and you stay dry, you'll recover enough to race again the next day. You can get away with that over 2 days, not any longer.
Right. Okay, great question from Stuart Smith. Would you rather run with Jim Man, or is the competitive spirit such you would prefer to run against him?
That's quite a good question, actually.
Yeah.
So Jim and I have had some great races over the years, like battling each other. We've also probably had more just adventures where we've run together. Both of us have got a strong competitive streak, but I think if I had to choose, I would go for the big challenge. So a couple of years ago, Jim and I did a rugby round together, which was just brilliant. We had such good fun. I would go for running together.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I'd like to I'll put that one off. Just to change tack a little bit now, Shane, and it's been great just to get to know a little bit of your climbing and your running. But I'm quite interested about the whole aspect of being the managing director of Ourea events and just the success that you've had in a number of events. So just tell us a little bit about what motivated you to start organising these events.
So if I kind of rewind back to, I guess, 2009, 2010, I was working as a consultant in the outdoor trade, doing mostly marketing, product development related things for lots of brands. I've worked for many outdoor brands over the years. And one of the jobs that I got was with Berghaus, and they wanted to have a independent person take a view on whether they should develop their own event, like a Berghaus owned event, or whether they should sponsor something big. They wanted to, be involved in a high profile UK event. So I did a little bit of analysis with them, came back with a little bit of report, and essentially said to them, I don't think as a company it's your priority to own an event. I think you should find the right organisation to partner up with and sponsor something, but really commit to sponsoring it. I think a lot of businesses make the mistake of a little bit of sponsorship and therefore they get a little bit of return, and they have this vision of the big return from sponsorship, but they don't get that because they're not invested in the project, and the race receiving the sponsorship is like, well, £1,000 here is useful, but it doesn't really change anything. And at the same time, I was doing a little bit of ad hoc race organising mostly for Detail Events, who are now Rat Race Adventure. And I kind of was, so that's where the experience of the event came from. And then I was also reading Feet in the Clouds. So I read the chapter on the Dragon's Back race from 1992. And I just put it all, suddenly, this light bulb moment as I put it all together. I went, Berghaus, Dragon's Back race. And I did this report for them, and I let it sit with them for about a month. Then I went back and I was like, you know what, I've had this idea. Would you be interested in this? And they just sat there and went, yeah, that sounds great. What do you need from us? And so all of a sudden, this kind of gem of an idea became something very real and tangible. And I decided, I guess I was in a fortunate position as well. I just finished a large chunk of work for Innovate, and I was lucky to do some consulting work for them when their business exploded, and they went from a relatively small brand to an international brand selling a lot of shoes. And my consultancy role effectively became a full-time position for about a year. So I had a little bit of money in the bank, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to take the time out. I'm going to spend most of 2011 doing some running and climbing, and I'm going to create the Dragon's Back race.
Wow.
So that was kind of all came together. There was no master plan creating an events business, that's for sure.
Right.
I just thought, I fancy doing this. I'll just spend 18 months doing this, and I'll see where it takes me.
Yeah. And at that stage, was it going to be just a one-off, or did you always think, once I do it once, I'll be doing it every other year, and now every year?
I was thinking it was going to be a one-off.
Right.
No, there really wasn't a master plan of organising events. I also, at the same time, Joe Falconer had been organising the Great Lakeland 3-Day for 10 years. And he had recently stopped organising that. And I thought, well, you know what, if I'm going to do the Dragon's Back, it'd be really good to essentially have a warm-up, kind of similar event in its multi-day, multi-location, but smaller and less complex. So I asked Joe if he would mind if I took on this event and he was like, "Oh, it's all yours." So took on the Great Lakeland 3-day. And that proved to be another great event that Joe did all the hard groundwork for.
And was that the same year, 2012?
So the first year I did my own events, I did the Great Lakeland 3-day in May 2012, and then Dragon's Back race September 2012.
Wow! Oh, yeah, so it was September the first year, wasn't it? Yeah. And the name Ourea, where does that come from?
So the Ourea, in Greek mythology, they're the children of Gaia. They're meant to live in the mountains, and therefore the ancient Greeks prayed to the Ourea as the kind of spirits of the mountains. And one thing that's always been really important for me is, having worked on big obstacle course races and adventure races, and they've definitely got their merits, but it's not personally what I like to see in a race in the outdoors, particularly in the mountains. I want my races to be very authentic, defined by the natural environment. The challenge is no more or less than just going through the terrain and over the mountains. So this kind of the Ourea, it's like the spirit of the mountains, the spirit of adventure. So that's where the name came from.
Yeah. Well, I must admit, Shane, I've done the Lakeland 3-day. I did Dragon's Back last year. I've volunteered at some of your events as well. And I must say, as someone who's involved, I just love them. And I think just seeing what they've become now, and just not just the runners, but your volunteer team, your full-time staff, has it surprised you just how big it's become and how well received it is?
Yeah, it was. It is a surprise. There's a healthy amount of luck and a lot of hard work that goes into making something successful. And I wouldn't pretend that there's not an element of luck to it. And if I think about over the best part of 10 years now, the races and events that I've created, more have failed and have been kind of let go than have succeeded. And I think it's easy for people to forget that. Right. I think one of the priorities one of the decisions I've always made as we've kind of slowly built up this momentum behind Dragon's Back and Cape Wrath and the Great Lakeland 3-day is to really, really focus on the quality of the delivery. And I've always, if we'd had a difficult choice to make between, can we afford this, will it make the event better, and what's the right thing to do, I've always erred on, we're going to invest in the event. We're going to ensure that we do the best possible event that we can, rather than try and kind of make small amounts of money from kind of cutting corners or reducing the quality of what we do. And I think whilst that has led to a very long and kind of basically painful process of building the business, we have built a reputation for quality and excellence, and that's partly because of that ethos, and also partly because the real simple choice and question I asked myself is, if I was doing this race, what would I like to experience? And if I ever get stuck on a decision, that's the question I asked myself. And probably 8 times out of 10, I will go on how the competitors would like to experience this will be the decision that we make. Not always, but most of the time. Yeah,
I must admit, having done the Dragon's Back last year, I would say that's obvious. It comes across really well that it's organised by people who love the route, who love the event, and who would, it was just, I just loved it. It was one of my bucket list things I wanted to do, and it didn't disappoint at all. In fact, it far exceeded my hopes and dreams for doing that race. So thank you very much personally.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
that's amazing to hear that. That is ultimately what I want our participants to have as an experience. So it's great to hear it when
And I'm not alone. You know, there's talking to people, and you know, at the events and different things. You know, people love them, and certainly I was hoping to be on the event team for this year for Cape Wrath, with the idea of doing it next year. So I'm just going to delay those a year. And
Okay.
yeah, right. We've got a few questions which are great. So let's answer those. Mike Dales, he wants to know: have you got any plans for a second VK in the British Isles? VK is the 1 kilometre vertical, isn't it? Which you do as part of the Skyline races.
So yeah, we have the Memoirs VK, which is part of Salmon Skyline Scotland. We don't have any more plans for other VKs, certainly organised by ourselves. I think our Skyline Scotland event is kind of quite a contained weekend of high octane mountain running, and I don't anticipate us kind of growing other events out of that. We might well expand that format, that weekend itself, but not other standalone events.
Yeah. Okay. And great question from Oliver Noakes, who Oliver did the Dragon's Back last year as well. And he said, Shane, do you wish you could do one of your own events? And if so, which one?
I do sometimes. It's funny, sometimes I'm greatly relieved that I'm not doing them. And sometimes I'm kind of basically desperate to do them. I sway between the two, for sure. I tell you what, I definitely, when I see kind of friends of mine like Jim Mann kind of tussling with other runners, I'm like, I'd love to be up there racing as well. That would be good. So Dragon's Back would be pretty cool to race, actually. Yeah. So maybe one day in the future I might be able to do that.
Yeah. Excellent. We've got a couple of comments based on what you said before. Debs White, are lots and lots of calories the secret to completing the Cape Wrath Ultra too? You were talking about one of your secrets for the OMM. Would that be true for Cape Wrath as well?
Yeah, definitely. So we've seen thousands of participants kind of take part or start those expedition races now. And without any doubt, the ones that are successful, doesn't matter if fast or slow, are the ones that have their personal admin sorted. And by that we mean it's, arriving at the overnight camp, getting dry clothes on, sorting out their feet, eating a meal, doing some stretching, having another meal. I would say getting enough calories is a really critical element to success at those events. You can, at a short event, even a long, 100-mile race or a 2-day mountain marathon, you can run at calorie deficits because it's a short period. But when, like at Cape Wrath, you're into 8 days of running, you need to be thinking about how I will feel in a week's time. So getting the calories in is really critical.
Yeah. Okay, another question on food from Mike Raffin. I don't know if you know Mike. Did you come across Mike? Mike Raffin?
I don't think so.
No, he's done a lot. He's a good friend from Scotland, and he's done a lot of the big, long Mark Coburn's events. And in fact, Mike had a major heart surgery 7 weeks ago, where he had his plumbing had to be redone, major surgery, and yet he ran 106 miles over the weekend as part of Mark Coburn's challenge of doing a lockdown ultra. So it was a 100 meter route that he went round and round for hundreds of times. Anyway, but Mike was asking, have you got any lightweight, high calorie foods you recommend? Talking about, if you're having to carry stuff, anything that you particularly recommend?
Yeah, for sure. So bags of mixed nuts. And that is my kind of go-to recovery food at an overnight camp for a mountain marathon. So, 100 grams of good quality nuts will be 600 calories. You're going to really struggle to beat that in terms of calories per gram than anything else. And kind of type of food, I mean, it's different. A Dragon's Back or Cape Wrath is different to a mountain marathon, because a mountain marathon, you've got to carry it, so the weight is critical. But kind of hot soup, kind of oat biscuits and nuts, that's got a really good mix of like the carbohydrate from the oat biscuits, the protein and fat from the nuts, and hot soup and salty soup to help rehydrate. Those are some of the mountain marathon secrets.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're eating nuts, are you okay without water, or would you need fluid to be able to get them down?
Well, I'm eating those nuts with soup. So
Right. Okay.
I've got some fluids going in. I mean, it's a bit different on the hill. So I'm kind of thinking about when you're finished racing at the moment. Certainly when I'm racing on the hill, as I've gradually improved as a runner over the years, I slowly became more fat adapted for kind of that endurance running. And I've consequently eaten less. And I also drink relatively little when I'm racing. I certainly, a mountain marathon, an entire day of mountain marathon racing, I might only drink maybe 1.5 liters over 7 or 8 hours.
Yeah.
But that means I'm quite dehydrated by the end of the race. So getting fully hydrated again is one of my benchmarks. I will not go to sleep until I've gone for that clear pee. Okay. And you just have to keep, however late you have to stay up, getting rehydrated is more important than sleeping for that 2-day duration.
Yeah. Okay. Stuart Smith says, there's a lot of talk about families appearing around running communities. He says, please pass on my thanks to Shane and our Ourea family for their support and promotion of some great events and letting me be involved. So that's nice.
Very kind.
Yeah. And Marcus Scotney, do you wish you could do the Dragons Pack race as a competitor rather than as a race organiser, which we talked a little bit. He said, you definitely get more sleep as a competitor than working on the event like we did back in 2012.
So Marcus helped and volunteered at the event in 2012, and he worked really hard. He got a really good insight into what's involved, and it is, it's really hard work. I think it'd be worth saying when Stuart talks about the Ourea family, I've really put a lot of emphasis and importance on treating our event staff, both the professional staff and the volunteers, really well. And I know that at these events, the events are too big for me to interact individually with every participant, but I know the volunteers and the event team will interact between them with every participant. So I really believe that if the event team are really motivated and happy and enjoying what they're doing, that comes through in every element of the event. And you do that by treating people well, giving them responsibility to do jobs, and that makes a big difference. And one of the things that we do as well, anyone who volunteers at one of our races gets a race credit equal to the value of the race. Yeah. So if you volunteer at Dragon's Back, effectively means you can do the next Dragon's Back for free. So consequently, two things happen. Often, most of our races are hugely oversubscribed to join the volunteer team. It can sometimes be more difficult to be a volunteer than to pay to enter the event. But it does mean a good proportion, at least 50% of our volunteers are actually active runners who are passionate and knowledgeable about what's happening. And that just carries through. And that kind of sense of family, as a good description, is really apt.
Yeah, and certainly that's part of my plan of helping next year with the Cape Wrath, so I can do it the year after. I think little things like I've got my calendar here that you sent to all the volunteers last year, and that sits proudly in my office here at home. And I think it's little things like that you just feel part of the group. So that's great. Thank you. And got a comment from Devon Scott, Devon, again, lives in Scotland and is planning to do the West Highland Way race this year, but obviously it's been cancelled as well. But she says, this is making me very tempted to enter the Lakeland 3-day. So you've got another fan there.
Well, the Great Lakeland 3-day has become a really good benchmark for people preparing for the expedition races. And if you do the expert course at the Great Lakeland 3-day, you really should, if you want to do Cape Wrath in end of May, or even Dragon's Back in September, you need to be coming to something like the GL3D and comfortably it doesn't need to be quick, but you need to be able to do those long days, day after day for 3 days, and go, I'm good to go at the end of them. Yeah, that's a really great benchmark. It's a bit like a really good shakeout, shakedown of your preparedness a few weeks before the event.
Yeah, I must admit, Shane, last year I hadn't initially planned to enter the Great Lakeland, but it came up, and I thought, well, I planned to do a big weekend that weekend anyway. It's my last big effort, and I thought, well, let's do it. And I must admit, I'm so glad I did. Because it just gave me a chance to practice some of the overnight camps as well, and thinking about how I was going to look after myself. And I would certainly recommend it. It worked out really well. We've got a comment from Oliver Noakes. He said the photo behind me is from day 4 of the Dragon's Back, and he's right. I love that view. You've come up after the checkpoint, and you climb up and you run along, and you've got that beautiful reservoir, haven't you, with the forest all around it. But he said it's before the 2 horrendous sections of road.
Yeah.
And we've got a question from Scott Brown. He said, how good should your navigation skills be for Dragon's Back race?
So there's no doubt about it. If you're kind of a navigational ninja, can use a map and a compass proficiently, that is the fastest way to navigate the course. But we do provide a recommended route, and that's printed on the map, and we provide a GPX route, which is the same as what's printed on the map. So, we do have people who are very, very novice navigators who are effectively following the GPS, who do complete the route. It's not the most efficient way to do it, and it's easy to make mistakes. And if you're going to be towards the back of the field and you're absolutely reliant just on the GPS to navigate, there's quite a risk that you'll make an error. You just miss a turn and you go down a couple hundred meters down a path, it's the wrong way, and then you realize it's wrong on the GPS, and just the time just ticks away. We do have quite a few people, although you can only enter as an individual, people enter as like small groups and teams of friends, and quite often you see a stronger navigator with 1 or 2 friends who are less competent. But I mean, to answer the question, it is entirely possible to do it just on the GPX and the GPS, but it's I would definitely recommend improving your map and compass navigation skills.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that as well. I think one of the things for me, I was aware that it was going to be at the limit of my ability. So I went down and recce'd the whole course over 5 weekends. And I love that as well. It was great just being able to go over the whole course. So I'd made my mistakes on the recce's really. I know not everyone can do that, can they?
No, they can't. We actually did some economic impact assessment of those recce weekends. I might not have the figure exactly right, but when you accounted for all of the participants and their friends, because most people do their recce's with friends coming to Wales, most people do, like yourself, multiple weekends to do the recceing. We generated something like 6,000-7,000 bed nights of accommodation in Wales before the Dragon's Back. I mean, it's actually quite significant economic impact just from people preparing to do the race. It's quite interesting.
We got a comment from Edward Chapman. It's not just the competitors that have a great experience, the volunteers do as well. And I remember last year when I helped at the Skyline races, you gave out plaques to 2 people who had volunteered at 25 different events. So it's amazing. You must have a team of people who just love to be there, don't they?
Yeah, we have we have the amazing group of volunteers that help, and within that there's a core of super regular helpers who, I mean, they're just brilliant. I mean, they make such a valuable contribution to the events, and we want to recognise that as well. So that kind of 25 event kind of long service award is part of that recognition, and we want people to feel valued because they are valued. And
the last question I've got, and then I've got just some quick fire questions to finish, if that was okay. This one's from Melissa White. I met Melissa a couple of years ago when we did the Ring of Fire around Anglesey. And Melissa had planned to run the Cape Wrath this year. She's from Australia, and obviously, but she's now looking forward to it next year. But she said, Shane, she says, eating I'm good at. I'm really looking forward to meeting you and your team for the Cape Wrath Ultra next year. I have been very impressed with your comms regarding COVID-19 race changes. So I think she just wants to say thank you for keeping her in touch and so that she knows what's going on. Yeah.
That's really, really nice to hear.
Yeah. Okay. Are you okay? Just doing quick fire questions to finish with?
Yeah.
And we're coming
sure.
up to an hour, so thank you so much for your time. And the first one is, what is the best piece of advice that you've been given?
So there's one that really sticks with me, and one of our regular helpers, also competitor, Nikki Summers, she has a kind of philosophy which I think is great, and that's don't be a dick, be kind.
Yeah,
that kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
Excellent. And what is your favourite piece of kit? I'm looking forward to this one because I know that you're very keen on.
I was thinking about this. So I'm going to say, this is a bit out there, I've got some windproof boxers from Gore Runwear, which for winter running are just brilliant.
Oh, I've never had that one before. That's excellent. Thank you. And what is your favourite go-to food in a long ultra? You've mentioned a little bit about food, but what would be the thing that you would go to?
I think I always like a bit of savoury food. I've become a bit of a fan of the Voom bars recently. I really like those. They've got a serious kick to them. So, yeah, definitely a fan of those.
Okay. And if you could do just one more ultra, which one would it be? Or one more event?
So, if I really was limited to one more big adventure, I wouldn't do an organised race. What I would really like to do is a winter Rigby round. So That is my number one thing on my list of running goals at the moment.
Okay. So just remind us, what is the Rigby round? Which one's that?
Okay, so the Rigby round is the Cairngorm Munros. It's about 120 kilometres of some of the roughest, difficultest, most challenging kind of terrain in Scotland. Jim Mann and I did when Jim was preparing for his Munro record, 24-hour record, we essentially accidentally did an entire Rigby round. We decided to go for a long run, and we set off, and we decided, well, now we've started, we may as well just do the whole Rigby round, which was brilliant fun. We did some very, very poor weather. But to do it in winter, it's never been done in under 24 hours in winter. I've got a very firm idea of what winter conditions means to me, and that means proper winter, snow on the ground, ice axe crampons essential for safe travel, and it's just very difficult to find the right day, right weather for that to happen. But me and Jim have both been thinking about that.
Okay, so watch this space.
Yeah, watch this space.
Yeah. And then the final question I've got is, do you have a mantra to keep you going when things get tough? Thinking more about the mental side of keeping going in some of these long events.
Yeah, really simple. I sometimes find myself chanting, the faster I go, the more I can eat. The faster I go, the more I can eat.
Right. Excellent.
And I think about that food at the end,
Yeah.
Just pigging out.
Okay, I'll remember that one. And we just got a final comment from Joe Faulkner. He says, founding the Great Lakeland 3-Day was very much born out of Dragon's Back 92. So that's interesting. That was probably the motivation that he... Yeah. And then I just have a comment which is anonymous, and he says, please tell Shane he has the noisiest tent on the field and to keep it down. and you might be able to guess who that's from.
Yeah, I can guess.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you so much for this morning, Shane. It's been great just to get to know a bit about your running, your climbing, and a little bit about the Ourea events. And certainly as a participant, as someone who's involved in your events, I just want to say thank you so much. You can tell that they are put on by people that really love the countryside, love the mountains, and want the best for their competitors and their team. So I'm looking forward to when we can get back. I'm sure you are, when we can get back out. You're hoping that some of the events might carry on in the autumn, but do you want to say anything about that as we finish?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously we're guided by whatever restrictions are in place by the UK government. But at the same time, we kind of have to take a common sense approach to it. So, like for Skyline Scotland, it may be that whilst there are restrictions are lifted, I could easily imagine the local community in Kynaston being anxious about thousands of people from around the world turning up in their village. So there's going to be some difficult decisions to make about whether these events can go ahead or not. It's way too early to make those decisions, but I'm thinking about it pretty much every day at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we trust you to make the right decisions at the right time, you know, and we'll wait to hear from that. Just got a comment, Matthew Harris, fab interview. Great to hear the story behind Ourea and the Dragons back. Thanks, John and Shane. And Jen Scottney, really great interview. Thanks, guys. Hopefully see you both soon. So we'll finish on that one, and we wish you all the best for the rest of your day and everything else that you're doing. But thank you so much for this morning, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.